You are listening to the Boss Experience Podcast, a podcast with conversations about business growth, self-development, and maintaining a mindset to achieve business success. My name is Michele Davis, and I am a business strategist and coach, and I am your host. Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of the Boss Experience Podcast. My name is Michele Davis, and I'm your host. And this is not just another episode, but this is another season. This is season 3. So I'm so excited to be here with you for another season. So in this season, it's going to be the common theme of confidence. What is it like to be confident in your business, to be confident enough to step out? You're going to hear from entrepreneurs that have stepped out. They stepped out scared. They stepped out in a way that maybe the odds were against them when they stepped out. But they did. And they didn't always have the confidence that you'll see them with, when they appear on the podcast or as they show up in their business. But this season is really all about helping you build confidence. The one thing that I want to talk about today is clearing your path to blossom. And so a lot of times when we don't allow ourselves to blossom and we don't allow ourselves to live our full lives, mentally, emotionally, physically, sometimes it's us. And then sometimes it's things that we allow to hold us back. And so this episode is really about kind of getting honest about the things that hold us back. And in this episode specifically, I want to talk about if trauma is something that's holding you back. The reason that I want to talk about trauma, because there could be a multitude of things, but that would be a really long episode if we focused on everything. So in terms of what it takes to clear your path to blossom, I want to focus on trauma because that allows us to stay focused, that allows us to identify this issue, and allows me to really talk through it very thoroughly for you. And so you may be wondering, well, what is Michele Davis? What knowledge does she have about trauma? And what makes her qualified to even, have this conversation with us? Because, she has no idea about what I've experienced. And so I am a trauma survivor. And so one of the things you've heard me talk about throughout all 3 seasons of the Boss Experience podcast is about things that people experience outside of just being an entrepreneur and making that next sale. So that's really what this podcast is about. And that's really what I've focused on throughout this entire season, right? So, the one thing that I want you to keep in mind, not only am I a trauma survivor, but I also worked with other trauma survivors, probably at a time that I probably shouldn't have been, but because I hadn't come to grips with my own stuff at that moment, but I worked with other trauma survivors as well. One of my previous jobs in what feels like a previous life was running a domestic violence shelter. And I did that for about 7 years. And it was a domestic violence shelter and a crisis hotline. And that gave me the opportunity to really have a deep understanding. When it comes down to working with someone who's experienced trauma, it also helped me come to terms and really acknowledge that some of the things that I had experienced. So it was really therapeutic for me. It was really good for me to work through it. And you may have heard this term before, trauma-informed programming or a trauma-informed program. And maybe you know what that means, maybe you don't. But one of the things that I did was make that shelter experience for the individuals that come into that shelter program a trauma-informed experience. And so, I won't get into what that all entails right now, but that is my experience with trauma, both being a trauma survivor and both helping others to heal from trauma. So in this episode, I want to talk about how trauma actually impacts us and prevents us from actually feeling confident in everything we do. And trauma, let's define it first, and then we'll talk about how trauma shows up. And then I'll get into some 5 key things you want to do when it comes down to healing from trauma. So trauma is basically any event that disrupts your emotional and mental stability and wellness, okay? Anything that disrupts your emotional or mental stability and wellness. So most people think, when they think about trauma, they think, that someone has to be raped, someone has to be beaten, someone has to experience domestic violence, experience something that is violent and extreme to experience trauma. And that is not the case. Someone can experience trauma from, childhood experience, whether you were beaten as a child or whether you were emotionally abused as a child or physically abused. You can experience trauma from a car accident. You can experience trauma from a multitude of things. And you can also experience trauma from a toxic workplace as well. And the first time that I actually met someone who actually talked about they were traumatized, I actually did not believe them when they said they were traumatized about going to work. And I didn't believe them because I had never heard of that before. I didn't know what that meant. And I didn't know how that one could experience feeling traumatized about going to work, especially if nothing happened to you at work. When I say happened, like you weren't, part of a burglary. There wasn't a traumatic incident that occurred that you happened to be present for. And so, and that was my ignorance in that moment about understanding what other people can experience. And I remember this young lady, I was coming in as a new director for the program. And this program was a program for women that were using alcohol and other drugs. I was coming in as a new director to lead the program. And I remember encountering this young lady who was going to be working with me as my data analyst. And she was going to be inputting all the numbers for the grants and everything. And I remember seeing her outside and she was shaking and I asked her if she was okay. And it was interesting because I didn't understand what she was experiencing or why she was even experiencing it. And I know now. I was coming in new. I had no idea about what had happened and what had transpired previously. And previously, she went through a lot of emotional abuse at work. And, experiencing emotional abuse at work is traumatizing. When you think about it, you're relying on that job to feed your family, to feed your kids, to keep a roof over your head. And when someone reminds you or re-traumatizes you, maybe you're coming, just like you're coming into entrepreneurship with your own traumas, you're coming into, your place of employment with trauma as well. And so when people, demean you or, they don't respect you or they dismiss you, it brings those things up. And so in this episode, I want to talk about just how to kind of transition from being in this place of maybe being stagnant and not really knowing what the cause is, not feeling confident and not knowing what the cause is, to clearing the path to blossom. So we know what trauma is and we know how trauma shows up, right? It shows up in your workplace. It shows up, in your relationship. It shows up in your ability to parent your children. We parent based on what we know. And so if you were parented in a traumatizing way, you're probably going to repeat the cycle. And it just shows up in our everyday life, how we deal with situations in life. And so when we talk about like what's holding us back, sometimes it's not as easy to just, kind of snap out of what's holding us back. But the thing that we have to do is we have to commit to identifying what's holding us back and commit to doing something about it. So if you are wanting to step into entrepreneurship, you're wanting to start your business, you want to make sure you're pushing for it. You want to make sure you're clearing the path for you to blossom. Before we hop into my 5 areas that you should focus on to help you blossom, I just want to reintroduce myself and share what I do. My name is Michele Davis, and I am a podcaster, but I'm also a business strategist. And so I work with coaches, consultants, and course creators to help them create their high ticket programs and services without the overwhelm, without the stress, and without the second guessing, that comes with not having a mentor by your side to walk you through everything you need to do to get started. So that's what I do in a nutshell. I have a program called CEO Blueprint Academy. So with CEO Blueprint Academy, that is an accelerated coaching program where we work together intensively in one day. And I give you support prior to that one day event and after. And I am accepting applicants for CEO Blueprint Academy. And so if you're interested in joining CEO Blueprint Academy, you can visit ceoblueprintacademy.com to get started. So with that being said, let's talk about the 5 things you need to do to clear your path to blossom. Hey, Michele Davis here, host of the Boss Experience podcast. I hope you're enjoying this episode, but I just wanted to pop in and ask you a really important question. Are you planning to triple your revenue with a group coaching program, retreat, or live event for your business? If so, I can help you get started with my high-ticket service checklist. This checklist allows you to seamlessly streamline your marketing and plan out the details of your event without completely losing your mind. So head over to bossbusinessblueprint.com to download your free high-ticket service checklist and bonus free training today. Now back to the episode. So the first thing you need to do to clear your path to blossom is you need to be honest. And so what does being honest look like? Sometimes when we think about the trauma that we've experienced, we actually don't think about it. We've forgotten that that's something that's deep down inside of us. We dismiss it as something that we experienced as children. It's been so long ago. How could that impact my life today? We have excuses for why it's not showing up and why it's not the cause of a lot of things in our life right now. And the way our life is going, the reason our relationships aren't working out couldn't be because of that, because that happened so long ago. So the thing you have to do is you have to be honest about where you are, what you've experienced, and you have to call it what it is. Which brings me to the second thing you have to do to clear your path to blossom is you have to reflect on how that trauma is impacting you right now. Because when you look at your life and you really inventory what's going on in your life, because sometimes we're sitting in chaos and we don't know that we're sitting in chaos because we don't want to know and we don't want to admit that we're sitting in chaos. And chaos doesn't always look, like this chaotic surrounding. It could be chaos internally that we're experiencing and we don't know why. And we're experiencing anxiety and we're experiencing all these other things, but we have no idea why we're experiencing those things. So you have to really reflect if things are in shambles or you feel like nothing's going right. You have to get to the bottom of it. And as an entrepreneur and as business owners, it will affect your business. It'll affect how you show up, whether you show up at all. Some people, they don't show up at all. They don't market. They don't do anything. And they wonder why their business is not taking off. They're wondering why their business isn't growing. They're wondering why they're not getting the traction that they desire. And you have to take an inventory and it has to be done in a way that's not compartmentalized. You want to look at everything collectively so that you have a full understanding of what's happening in your world and in your life. So first, you have to be honest, you have to reflect, and you have to commit to heal. And so when we talk about healing, you have to do the work. If you've been following me on the Boss Experience podcast for some time, you know that I have special guests on and, they are life coaches. I haven't had a health coach on yet, but business coaches are different. There's coaches, there's a coach for everything. And so depending on where you are in your healing journey, you may need therapy first, or you may be at a point where you need a coach. And that's not anything that I can help you distinguish in this podcast episode. But what I want you to do is to be able to think and think about, hey, is it counseling that I need, or could this coaching program benefit? So a lot of it just depends on where you are in your entire healing process. And I think also depends on what you're healing from, what kind of therapeutic interventions you had in the past. So you really have to sit and really think about where am I in my healing journey before you can kind of decide that this is a situation where I need counseling versus therapy. But the point I want to make is to commit to heal. So that is number 3. Number 1 is be honest. Number 2, reflect. Number 3, heal and commit to healing. And number 4 is give yourself permission to be bold. Give yourself permission to be confident. Give yourself permission to bloom. And when we talk about giving ourselves permission, we tend to talk ourselves out of a lot of things, especially when it comes to confidence and not feeling confident about who we are as a person and who we are as business owners and entrepreneurs. We can talk ourselves out of a lot of things. And so you have to give yourself permission to step out of your comfort zone. You have to actively challenge yourself to not be held back by your lack of confidence. And for a lot of people, this is really, really challenging because you're asking me to do what? You're asking me to be in front of a camera. I'm introverted. I'm doing, I'm whatever. And I'm just using camera as an example. But even if you don't get in front of a camera, there's other ways you can show up for your business. There's other ways you can do video for your business. You just have to be committed to learning those other ways. A lot of what you want to do, when you talk about being committed and exploring your options, is you want to find, you want to work with a coach, you want to work with a mentor that's going to help you do that. So, and give you options to do that. So you definitely want to clear the path and give yourself permission to show up. And you do that by inventorying how you need to show up. And then you figure out, well, this is what I'm going to do. Because you figure out what needs to be done and then you commit to doing it. Because you could talk about all of the different ways and all the things that you can't do, but giving yourself permission to be confident and to be bold and to blossom is about switching that mindset and really focusing on how you can do it instead of giving yourself like all these excuses about why you can't do something. So that's number 4. And number 5 is get support. So, we've talked about being honest. We've talked about reflection. We talked about healing and being committed to doing what it takes to heal. We've talked about giving yourself permission to be bold, to be confident, and to blossom. You have to get support because you cannot do this thing of healing. You cannot do this thing of reflection. And, you need support. And even throughout your healing journey, you need support to get through it, and, when you think of support, people may be saying, well, I don't want to rehash this in my family. I don't want to burden my family. And your family isn't your only source of support, but I don't think it's healthy for you to dismiss them, especially if your family is like your immediate family, like your spouse and your kids. And you don't have to get into like details about what your trauma was with your children, but you need to talk to them that, when mommy is going through something and that mommy needs support too. And I think it's good to reinforce that with your children. And it's also good to reinforce that with your spouse because, a lot of times in marriages, you get lost in everything that your family needs and you forget about what you need. And you need to remind your spouse that you need this healing, you need this time, or you need to express that. And your spouse is not a mind reader, or your partner, or whatever the case may be. They're not mind readers. And so it's important that you give them an opportunity to support you. So once you start reaching out to people, you'll be amazed where your support comes from. Maybe it's a support group, maybe it's a Facebook group. There's support out there. And if you're part of a community of entrepreneurs, I'm sure there's support within, those little pockets of entrepreneurs in the different Facebook groups. And, you just have to want it and you have to commit to it and you have to be willing to seek out everything you need so that you can clear the path to blossom and show up and be confident in your business.
Did you know you can get funding for your business even if you're just starting out? We work hard every day to help businesses just like yours get the funding they need for marketing, expanding, or just to get through a rough time. So whether you are part of the gig economy, a freelancer, or you have a brick-and-mortar business, we can help you even if you were previously denied funding from the bank. You just need to be in business 3 months or more and earn at least $3,000 a month in revenue. No collateral is required, and we offer instant approvals in most cases. Remember, no matter how small your business is, we can help. Just visit fundsforsmallbusiness.com to get started today. Now, back to the episode.
So with that being said, that's it for this episode. And I want to thank you for tuning in, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care and be well. And thank you for tuning in to the Boss Experience Podcast. Bye. Thank you for tuning in to the Boss Experience Podcast. Don't forget to leave a review for this episode and tune in next time.